Mr. Cristino,
Here.
Mr. Kizelbosh,
Here.
Mr. Eugen,
Here.
Mr. Alvarez.
Here.
Thank you.
We do have a quorum, so we'll proceed. In the form of announcements, you may not see all the commissioners on camera tonight because of the coronavirus seating requirements and keeping the 6-foot spacing. It's a little bit unusual, but we have 3 of our commission members sitting actually in front of us. May make for better communication anyway. Tonight, excused is Mr. Reyes, and voting in his place will be present via Zoom, as we mentioned, Janet, our staff secretary, and we do have some distinguished guests tonight that I'm going to defer and let our community director introduce them. The next order of business would be the approval of minutes of our June 4th, 2020 Planning Commission minutes. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read them. Does any of the commissioners have any comments, corrections to them? Hearing none, would someone make a motion for their acceptance?
So moved.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we accept the June 4th, 2020 Planning and Zoning Commission minutes.
Okay, we have
I'll
a
second them.
motion by Mr. Carter.
I'll second it.
And Mr. Hoogan has seconded it. All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Silence. Unanimously, our secretary did a great job again. Or technical writer, I guess, is her proper title. Tonight, we have no quasi-judicial projects or public hearings, and we have, believe it or not, no unfinished business, so we're right up to staff, up to queue, thanks to our staff. The next item on the agenda would be public input by any citizens either present or present via Zoom. And I would ask for any those citizens present who would like to have a comment on any item that's not on the agenda. Limit would be 5 minutes discussion. Anyone present with information to present? Seeing none.
We have one in
Is there
Zoom.
any on Zoom?
Yes.
Could the person on Zoom please give their name and address?
Go ahead, Mr. Graham.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Graham Cox. I live at 1213 George Street in Springfield. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you on Zoom. I have about a dozen comments on the various parts of the comprehensive plan draft, but I'm assuming I will be able to give those as we go through the various sections.
I'm sorry, I didn't get your
We can barely
comment.
understand you, Mr. Cox.
Let me try again. I
There
speak
you
pretty
go.
good English, but we'll try again. I have a dozen comments on the comprehensive plan, but I'm assuming that we will be giving those comments when we go through the various sections. Is that true?
I think you're referring to making a comment about the discussion later on the elements in the plan, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, there will be a point of discussion after the presentation. Yes, and that is on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else on Zoom?
Not that they have raised their hand.
Nothing? Okay. So let's move forward then. So nothing further under public input. New business. We are going to discuss the introduction and 3 elements of our comprehensive plan and review the goals, objectives, and policies and the updated information that's in it. I am going to ask our Community Development Director, Ms. Fraser, if you would introduce this project for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really excited for all of us to be back in working order, modified working order, certainly, but I have a great deal of confidence in this group in pulling it off. I thank you for your public service. I truly do. This evening, as Mr. Roth has stated, we are going to be reviewing, we have an introduction portion basically for your edification, and then of course infrastructure element, governance and implementation, and then the public schools facilities. What we'd like to do is that our Kimley Horn consultant, Mike Votto, is here. Mike has been working alongside staff for many months, and he will give a presentation on each element, but we'll stop after each. So he'll give his presentation on introduction, and then we'll give a chance for everyone to discuss and the public to give input, and then we'll move on for infrastructure and do that presentation, and then give you all a chance to discuss. And this way we can stay within the elements and make sure that we capture all of your comments. I know Janet's doing a great job, but I have my little paper here, and I'm going to be Vanna White, and I'm going to be taking down notes as best I can. So I hope that all works for us, and unless you have any other questions, Mike can move forward. Does that sound like a good plan? Wonderful. Thank you so much for your attention.
Are you handling the introduction or?
I'm sorry?
Are you handling the introduction of the plan, or is that part of the presentation?
It's part of the presentation,
Okay.
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Sure. We'll just need to bring the, great. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. It's a pleasure to be with you all here this evening. Do I need to turn this on? Can you hear me now? Okay, I'll have to scoot in. Okay, all right.
That's better.
Again, like I said, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, it's a pleasure to be with you all here this evening. And like Ms. Fraser said, it's been a pleasure working with city staff in this effort. This is an exciting project. I grew up not too far from here, up the coast in Cocoa Beach, so it's fun to make my way back over and work on a project over here on the coast. So we will get started here. Again, a little bit of background on the comprehensive planning process. The city's existing plans from 2009 went through some updates through the EAR process, and we're here to update this plan by September 2020. And from my understanding, I think we've had some briefing on some of the procedural stuff here, so we won't trudge through all of that. But again, comprehensive plan, it's a set of policies that the city it's our city's guiding vision through 2040. And that's expressed in goals, objectives, and policies. And those goals, objectives, and policies are supported by the data inventory and analysis that's in the back of each element. And that's the goals, objectives, and policies support that, that data. And again, real quick, comprehensive plan is not the land development regulations. Again, just so that we're clear here, the goals, objectives, and policies in the comprehensive plan aren't the nuts and bolts of setback requirements, height limits, so on and so forth. So again, it's the overarching vision for the city, and then once this process is completed, then the city will move on to updating the land development regulations. And again, like you saw on the agenda, tonight we're here to talk about the introduction to the plan, the infrastructure element, the governance and implementation element, and the public schools element. You can see the ones that are grayed out there are the ones that will be in discussion in forthcoming meetings. Then we'll talk about what's next here at the end of the presentation. A little bit of our approach, our team's approach in working with the city. We started out by taking a large spreadsheet that had all the statutory changes from the last time the plan was updated, went down the line with all the existing goals, objectives, and policies, and cross-referenced if there was anything by statute that would need to be updated in this next iteration of the plan. Likewise, we made another matrix of all the goals, objectives, and policies in the plan, looked for things like land development regulation language that might be in the plan, inconsistencies in terms, things that might be outdated, things that might be redundant, and then made recommendations on each policy to staff with what we could do to improve upon the plan. The data inventory analysis, we updated that using the latest data provided by the city, by the county, by the state. Then moved on to doing a strike through underline, which I believe you all have seen, where we strike through stuff that we were recommending should be removed and underlining new language. And then what you have is drafts of the updated element that incorporates that new DIA and the proposed goals, objectives, and policies. Okay, so we're going to talk about the introduction of the plan. This is not required to be part of the plan, but in just discussions with staff, we think this is a good foundational introduction to the rest of the elements in the plan, kind of give some guiding language, what the city was envisioning and updating the plan, kind of the framework, and then gets into some of the legal status of the plan, what shall means, what should means, what will means, so on and so forth, how the plan shall be interpreted, and a little bit on the public engagement process. So again, it's kind of a brief synopsis of the plan update. So actually, I think we'll pause there for any discussion on the introduction to the plan.
I think what we'll do as far as commissioners' questions is we'll make it a point so that we don't miss anyone to start with Mr. Quizzlash. If you have any questions on the introduction, we don't need to belabor it, but don't want to miss anything and just go around the room. If you have any questions on the introduction?
No, I don't have any questions.
None? Okay.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
No questions.
Mr.
No
Carter?
questions.
None?
I'm fine.
No questions.
Mr. Simmons?
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I don't either, so we're clear. We'll just follow that just to make sure so that you're not missed. Okay.
Great.
Then we
Great.
can move forward to the
Mr. Chair,
infrastructure.
Mr. Roth?
Yes.
At this point, did you want to get public's input for each section, or what's your desire?
I think it probably would be good, and thank you for correcting me on that. We did talk about that. It would be, if we have anyone, I don't see anyone from the public other than staff here, so it'll be a matter of, is there someone on Zoom who would like to comment on the introduction?
Mr. Cox would. Mr. Cox, you need to unmute. There you go.
I've unmuted. I hope you can hear me more clearly than with the last episode here. Is that okay?
We've got you as loud as we can, and you're fading in and out.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in New York, so that might explain a lot.
Okay.
I have a comment in the introduction dealing with the public engagement section. At the meeting that you had on June 4th, people showed up from the public, and I'm going to suggest that you do a more thorough job in getting people to comment on this plan. I know comprehensive plans are terrible, boring things, but what I'm suggesting is that you might want to produce a 10 or 15-minute video to go on the city's TV channel, and or put up a display in City Hall explaining what the elements of it are and inviting public comment on this plan. I know it's a pain to do it, but if people don't come to you, you have to go to the people. And so I'd suggest that as part of the public engagement thing. Thank you.
Okay.
For the record, could you please give us your name again? I didn't get it, and I don't know that our technical writer got it either.
Sure. I know Janet, but this is Graham Cox, C-O-X.
Graham Cox, okay.
13 George Street.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I know it was a little difficult to hear Mr. Cox, and I apologize. I mean, our technology is only so good. But I believe what Mr. Cox was trying to say is again, attempting to reach out to more of the public, and we all appreciate that very, very much. But Mr. Cox, we're having a difficult time hearing you. And so I think I'd like to bring up a good point, is that, you know, anybody through this process, it doesn't just have to be this evening that we receive public comment on these elements. I mean, you know, 2 weeks from now, somebody could send me an email or, you know, a comment and say, you know, could you consider this? And Mr. Cox, if we're not grabbing, you know, everything that you're saying, I encourage you, sir, to please send us an email, Dory and I know you have our email addresses, and we'd be more than pleased to hear from you and to take your comments into consideration if we don't capture them all this evening. And I say that for everyone, all of the public. I mean, you're all public. You understand that, right? You constitute the public, except that you all have taken that extra step to do the heavy lifting as representatives of the public, and I truly appreciate it. So I just wanted to put that out there, that if we don't hear Mr. Cox or anybody from the public this evening, they have the ability to send us their comments so that we can really capture them.
Well, also, if I understand it right, we have several meetings coming up on the different elements. And it's possible if, I know it wouldn't be a true agenda item if we're talking about a different element, but if, for example, in Mr. Cox's place, or any other resident for that matter, a citizen, could come back and bring something up that wasn't clarified to their satisfaction at one of the future meetings in the public input section of this. So I hope that satisfies Mr. Cox's point. I didn't grasp much of what he was saying, and I know that cell phones are great, but they're only limited by how close you are to a tower, and that doesn't always work. I know. Anyone else on Zoom for public comment on okay. Then that would conclude the public comment on this part of it, and we'll proceed then with the the infrastructure element of the plan and your presentation on that.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so we're going to move on to the infrastructure element. This was formerly known as the public facilities element. So this element is addressed at meeting needs for water, potable water, wastewater, solid waste, and stormwater drainage. Again, this element primarily is establishing the level of service standards for these services, and again, ensuring that available capacity is available to support new development. And again, note, this isn't new information, but you know, water, wastewater capacity is determined by Indian River County Utilities. So a lot of this element, and solid waste. So a lot of this element is determined by county capacity. So we'll move forward here. So we did update the data inventory analysis. Again, like mentioned earlier, we updated this using the best available city and county data. Looked at things like the city's existing stormwater master plan and existing and proposed septic to sewer conversion program. So reference to these other plans is made in that data inventory analysis. And then we're proposing goals, objectives, and policies that support the implementation of those things. So kind of a little bit of an overview. some proposed changes that you'll see in the goals, objectives, and policies. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the process, we looked at ways that we could streamline and reorganize and reduce redundancies as for clarity of the plan. So in the existing, what is called the public facilities element, now the infrastructure element, there was 4 goals. We streamlined that down to 1 goal where there's 12 objectives. Currently, our proposed element is 5 objectives. So again, looking to make things more clear, user-friendly, both for implementation by the city and for the public and development community. We're proposing planning for resilient infrastructure policies. So those numbers are noted there. Again, some new innovative language on planning for resiliency in the city for this critical infrastructure. We have a policy supporting septic to sewer conversion, and then also one supporting an update to the stormwater master plan. And again, that's not every policy in there, but we're picking some highlights that are of note. We looked at how we could streamline the plan. Like I mentioned previously, we took the goals from 4 to 1, and then made the objectives more clear and focused on each of those public facilities, wastewater, solid waste, so on and so forth. A big part of this element, and we'll see this in forthcoming in the coastal and conservation element too, but it was very important in our discussions with the city to implement and reference the city's coastal resiliency plan and add references to that plan into this element, especially as it relates to the adaptive capacity of the city to maintain critical infrastructure in the case of sea level rise, flooding scenarios. So you'll see the coastal resiliency plan has its mark in this element. This is that planning for resilient infrastructure policy that I mentioned earlier. Again, this is the city showing its intention to prepare for natural disasters and emergencies. And even in the course of the past 3 months, we even updated the language in this draft policy to reflect dealing with pandemics and epidemics as well.
We had some experience on that.
Yeah, right. We're ahead of the game, but there was interest in showing the city was forward thinking in that regard. And then another kind of innovative forward-thinking policy that in discussion with the city that you'll see draft in there was supporting the availability of affordable high-speed internet. And while the city doesn't provide that on its own, it's an important factor in livability, whether that means in a time like this that people can access information, even access medical care virtually. So we incorporated that within this element too. Mentioned too, this draft policy is supporting septic to sewer conversion within the city, and again, supporting existing and proposed plans to do so. And again, there's a policy supporting the city's forthcoming update to the stormwater master plan. So with that, we'll pause there
Okay.
on the infrastructure element, and any discussion items or questions?
And first, we'll go to the commissioners if they have any questions on this, and we'll use the rotation again just so we don't miss anyone. Starting with, you have the pleasure to go first, Mr. Kuzabash.
Oh, no problem. My concern is what will be the design criteria for this level of service? And who will be in charge for that? And who will decide the scale of that service, which is A scale, B scale, C, D, something like that, for the level of service? It will be in a county, or it will be city, or it will be a consultant?
So in the case of potable water, wastewater,
Can you restate that? I'm not quite sure I understand. No, Mike, you're in. so I can write it down.
Oh, okay, so the question was about the determination of the level of service?
Design criteria for the level of service for each facility.
Okay.
Who will be then charged and who will finalize this criteria? Is there any scale in our agenda, in the planning? Catalog, will be any scale for that level of service?
So,
I mean, level A, level B, level C, like that.
so, in relation to potable water, wastewater, and solid waste, those level of service standards, the city is maintaining what the county is, the county level of service for those particular services. So for example, for potable water, the county level of service is, pardon me, it's here on the first page, so is 250 gallons per day per equivalent residential unit. So these are the county utilities level of service standards, and the county is providing those services, so the city is in turn reflecting those standards within the city's comprehensive plan.
Yeah, that's criteria for per capita, okay. My concern is there, if some consultant come for any annexation of any property, and who will be in charge for deciding this is suitable for that area? Because if the facility is not available, and the capacity is less, and the population growth is more, so what do we do that in such situation? Who will tell that, okay, this is not feasible? And who will be in charge for that?
Well, well, I think we all know that when a development comes in, the developer or the engineer has to prove to the city that they can meet the level of service and that the capacity is available, right? So then they, as you know, they get a capacity certificate from Indian River County saying, I've now reserved so much for my development, and so then it's there, and of course then the county, and I don't know if this is for edification for everyone, and stop me when I'm wrong, Mike, I only play an engineer on TV, but the county's plant is built for so much, right? Capacity and service, and we're talking wastewater or water, right? And so they have so much set aside. And it's basically first come, first serve, right? If you put your capacity reservation in and pay for it, now it's set aside for your development, correct? And then the county is to look at the land use that is laid out for that particular area, right? And kind of determine it when they're doing future growth of a plant, future expansions of a plant. They look at the land use and the build-out criteria, and based on the level of service, then they can decide if they need to build out the plant or make some other modifications. Does that make sense to you? And
Yeah, I mean,
correct?
it's mean for the infrastructure, it's not in the hand of city, it's in the hand of county, right?
Well, the paying of the infrastructure is always put on the developer. If a developer
I
wants
mean, the
a...
approval will be in the hand of the county, because all this is.
Correct, that's correct, sir, yes, but based on the criteria I just outlined.
Okay, all right.
I mean, the capacity is the capacity, and if you have a development and the capacity's there and you pay for your reservation, you're first in line. First in time is first in line, right? So if you pay for it, it's set aside for you, and then they can't sell it to somebody else.
Okay, all right.
Does that, I hope that answers. Mike, am I right?
No,
Yeah.
it was a
Am I good?
good question, good response.
No, that,
Ms.
yeah,
Fraser.
no, that's awesome, thank you.
And that basically would be handled by these checkpoints you have outlined in all these different sections of the different person designated to meet with the county on whatever matter it is, or another area, that organizational checkpoint will be handled by that. When the developer comes in, we see what it is, then we'll handle it accordingly with the right area in the county.
And that is
Vero
correct.
Beach, however.
All of our site plans or subdivisions, the distribution list of course, includes, the county. We always have to send it to IRC Utilities and Roads, and so that they can come back. They're very much aware of what's being planned, and they can say whether the capacity is good or not.
Okay. Answer your question, Mr. Kuzumash, then?
No, that's it.
Mr. Cristino?
No, I don't have any comment on that. I just remember last year during the annexation hearings that we had a difference of opinion with the county regarding the plans for the density of that project, where they clearly stated that the capacity did not exist. There was a difference of opinion, so this needs to be coordinated ahead of time before we decide on how many units we can fit within the city housing units, and make sure that we coordinate that properly.
If I may, please. Actually, the county didn't say they didn't have capacity. They have available capacity. However, they don't want to allocate it for changes in land use, because their capacity, they've already done their build-out analysis based on existing land use, and they want to allocate it for some other developments, not new ones. So we'll just let it lay there. The capacity is available.
That's a concern that I've had also, that, once you're in, you have it, but it truly, I don't believe, was the case. The capacity appeared to be there, but in different accounts it wasn't. And I don't believe that's fair, but it's something that, and that's why I brought up the question about meeting with the different groups and, trying to make sure that there is a fair and equitable resolution, and it's not someone there with the thumb on the scale tipping it one way and they shouldn't be. But anyway, it's an editorial point, I'm sorry. That answer your question okay, Mr.
Yes, somewhat.
Cristino?
I believe one of the other remarks were, the capacity would exist, but it was unfair for that one project to eat up that large a percentage of the available capacity that was available for the entire county. So we just need to make sure that we get along with everybody and plan.
That's right.
Accordingly.
Exactly.
That's what we're doing
Yes.
here.
That's what we're talking about, to try to help
Okay.
prevent those things in the future.
That's it. I have no further questions.
Okay.
Okay,
Mrs. Kautenberg?
thank you. Who knew? I have concerns about solid waste. Who knew? In reading this, I note that the objectives are clear. I would presume that obtaining those objectives is then related to things that the city council would then put into place. I have concerns about solid waste removal being voluntary in the city. I think we're having some issues. In fact, I've seen them in my neighborhood with the dumping of solid waste on any available vacant lot, and that isn't a problem that's recent. That's been a problem over the 25 years that I've been here. It continues, and I think the city needs to step forward and say, come on, $35 a quarter is reasonable enough for anyone. That I believe that if waste was picked up at every home, we'd see a whole lot less dumping. I also have a little bit of a concern about the handling of hazardous waste and storage and transfer facilities, and I'm just wondering if that also couldn't be, that responsibility couldn't be directed toward the entities that sell those hazardous waste things. For instance, when you go have new tires put on your car, or you have a battery replaced in your car, they take the old one, the people who sell you the new ones take the old one, and they are responsible for disposing of it properly. They're licensed to do that, they're licensed to handle it, and yes, indeed, we end up paying for it. If anybody's who's changed those recently, you pay a small fee for the disposal, the proper disposal of those things. I'm thinking that, and it's because I've seen some things lately with paint cans that have paint in them. And I think we've probably all witnessed this, that you find them in odd places where they don't belong. And again, it's because I think a lot of people just don't know how to handle it. So those are my thoughts on solid waste. And am I to assume that that then reverts to the city council to take care of those issues? That's my question.
I guess that would be a policy decision, right, as far as.
I'm not sure why it would be the city council to take care of beefing up. I'm sorry. I'm understanding your comment to be that we should beef up some of our ordinances or policies regarding disposals, basically.
Right.
Illegal disposals and hazardous waste disposals, and that possibly we explore, what the policy could state is that we shall explore the need to ensure or try to ensure the proper disposal either of illegal dumping or hazardous materials by incurring a fee. I think that's what you're trying to maybe say. And then yes, if we then now take it after the comp plan's done, now staff takes it and we come up with a policy or a referendum, not a referendum, I'm sorry, resolution that says we should put fines to this, then it goes to city council. You're absolutely correct on that. Am I getting your question correct? I'm sorry.
I think we're probably headed in the same direction. I was just concerned, is it this body that says that, do we recommend to city council that they enact?
Yeah, oh, yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Okay,
I'm sorry, when I say staff will put it together, obviously it goes to you all first for any kind of resolution or ordinance change, and then you would recommend yes or no, and it would go to city council. Yes, ma'am, that's true for everything. Yeah. I apologize if I missed that step in my talk, but.
No, I just get a little concerned about having lofty objectives without having specific paths to reach them.
I'm going to second.
And for me, sorry.
Well, I'm sorry. No, I'm going to second your concerns. I believe the cost of garbage and recycling pickup here is extraordinarily low. Anyone who's moved from anywhere else in the country is paying triple
Everybody.
in their communities. Yeah. I think it should be part of our future plan with development ahead on the horizon and existing problems that Louise and I both see, the difficulties that our code enforcement officers have at the present time dealing with furniture, rugs. I've got one down the street. It takes them 3 months to deal with that one house. And as the city grows, these problems will only grow. They're not going to shrink. I believe it should be in the comp plan that we're going to require homes in the city of Sebastian to contract with Waste Management for that low cost. It includes everything: yard pickup, bulk pickup, recycling, 2 pickups a week for garbage. I think it'll go towards a blight issue in the future, towards mitigating that. In a community I was previously in, oil was accepted, which they do accept here. They don't charge for it. We used to charge $2 a gallon to recycle that oil. Up north, they would use that oil to heat the Public Works building. Here, we don't need that. Paint, they do take paint. There's no charge. They shouldn't be taking full cans. They're not supposed to. That was an annual issue. If you had full paint cans, you'd have a once-a-year pickup. Here, they tend to put it on the table, and the fella never checks it. So I agree with you there. We've got some issues to look at. I think that Louise's idea deserves a good look at and some discussion in the future elements of the comp plan. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Mr. Carter?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pardon me. My concern is on septic to sewer conversion. I consider that probably one of the most important issues over the next decade and even going further. I think we need to have something more robust in our comprehensive plan to address that issue. I know we talk about the Indian River County or Indian River Drive area and things like that, but what are we going to do about the other parts of the city of Sebastian? None of that is addressed in here, and I think that's something that we need to be thinking about sooner rather than later, because it's affecting the quality of water in the river, which is one of the reasons why people want to move to this area, and not to mention our overall health. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, I don't mean to keep coming, but I'm trying to get your comments correct. So you believe we should possibly put in an additional policy talking about the areas that currently do not have sewer available, and saying that the city shall pursue other avenues of.
Because it really doesn't say that in this section.
I agree. Okay, I got it now. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
I'm going to go out of turn just for a moment, and I want to second that because that's a major concern that I've had all along. We had a plan come up a couple of weeks ago, just as a point of reference. I don't want to belabor it, but we really, really need to address it and somehow recommend this to council and get it changed, because it's got to turn direction and get ahead in that way. That people need to connect to the sewer and somehow come up with a way to do it.
Excuse me, can I just ask, perhaps Lisa knows, is the Superfund still available?
Superfund, I'm not sure. Those are federal dollars for cleanup.
Well, we do have a messy river.
God, I really, truly hope that our river isn't going to be looked at as a Superfund site. Oh, then we're in big trouble, worse than COVID here. But, there has been a study, I was just speaking with Mr. Hugen about it, before the meeting. There was a study performed by Schulke, Biddle, and Stoddard for the county regarding ranking of areas within the county. It's online if you ever care to go, for the Indian River County website, where they ranked the different hot spots in the city, or in the county that were contributing possibly more pollutants than other areas based on septic, okay? And they ranked them, and it's an interesting study, but unfortunately, these areas do not have sewer available to them, and to put sewer into these areas is incredibly expensive. I mean, it's not just running force mains and main lines. I mean, all the laterals, and it would be incredibly expensive. So until we can come up with another alternative, which this study did come up with a few, new alternatives, it'll be very difficult, I'm telling you, to put everybody on sewer. But, as you know, we in the city, no new development, as long as they're within, I think, 500 feet, am I correct, of a sewer line, they have to connect if they're within 500 feet. So we don't allow septic, except in, of course, in low density residential areas. But it is very difficult, but I encourage the policy because we should keep that in the forefront. Technology catches up with us and may allow us to be able to do it in a reasonable cost. And then that would, that's fabulous, I think.
I think, just to pitch in here, and I think Mr. Kizilbosh will agree, the approximately 2,000 available lots in the city, they've been platted for many, many years, fall below the existing 2012 flood elevation maps. So the practice is to bring in 25, 30 truckloads of fill. However, in the neighborhoods that utilize swales to remove stormwater, they have there's a steep grade on a lot of these. Collier Creek is an example. These areas fertilize, these neighbors fertilize, and with the septic systems, if they're failing, that accelerates the flow of the wastewater into these culverts, so to speak. Perhaps there's a way to engineer the lots so that they level off more gradually than a steep drop, which allows waste or fertilizers to be absorbed into the soil instead of getting into the wastewater stream. I don't know if that makes any sense. You could have explained it better.
Yes, it's main concern is the pollution to the water tables, to the lagoon. So that's the main concern with the septic system. So within the city of Sebastian, which is already developed on those streets, I don't know. We need a lot of money, as you said, to bring the sewer. So, but right now it has to be on a septic system, all those individual lots. So there's no other choice. So that's,
Well, we'll need to
yeah.
look into that in greater
Yeah.
depth, and I jotted that as one of the action points that we need to really work on. There's 3 so far. Just a quick question on that. Do we have a map of the existing sewer lines in Sebastian?
Yes, sir. Now,
We do.
please be aware that, inlets and different pumps and all of that, because of, what word do I want to use? Terrorism? I don't know. But just security, because of security issues, Indian River County doesn't like to provide detailed data. But yes, we certainly know where the sewer lines are, the main lines, absolutely. We have one that goes down Indian River Drive, that's Force Main. We have one that goes down, or up and down US 1, but it's on the east side of the railroad. And Bosch,
Schumann Drive. They had
Schumann Drive, that is correct, sir. And then, of course, 512 on the south side of 512, it goes down. And, of course, we all know that the county continues to add more north of us. And so those are the only ones I'm aware of, Bosch. I don't know if...
that's it. Yeah.
Well,
That's it.
I didn't mean to develop in another conversation, but I think that's something that would be helpful if we as commissioners would know that particular thing, and it will help us, decide where we should move forward with that. Mr. Alvarez?
No, I'm fine.
You're fine? Okay. Mr. Hunt?
Yeah, I have one thing back to, Lisa and I were talking about the septic tanks. My concern too is not only the Indian River, but as the water table rises, which we all know during the rainy season, it's going to rise. That puts the septic tanks and the drain fields probably in the first layer of the aquifer that we're collecting water in. So we need to get rid of those septic tanks. And I know it's going to be an astronomical figure to do it because just the engineering part of it, and probably need a new sanitation plant someplace out west. So, but that's my biggest concern of the sewer, the septic to sewer. That's all I have.
Mr. Simmons?
I'm okay.
You're okay. My questions that I had were all taken care of. Just one quick question. You've got some figures mentioned in here on solid waste level of service, and we're actually quite a bit under that. Those were taken from recent data. I'm looking at page 16, solid waste level of service, the 7.52 capacity, and we're at 4.46.
Correct. Yep. So that data was provided by Waste Management. That's the best available data that Waste Management was able to provide as of a month or so ago.
Okay.
Now that's based on number of customers, not number of residents.
Okay, so their capacity could be expanded. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Is there anyone on Zoom at this time that has a comment about number 4, infrastructure element?
Yes, we do. Give us,
We do.
go ahead, Mr. Cox. I mean,
I think I've unmuted.
yeah,
Is that-
you're unmuted.
Okay, I have about a dozen comments, but in the interest of time, I will email all my comments to Lisa tomorrow, and with the understanding that she's going to circulate them to the P&Z members, so that we're not here till midnight. Thank you.
Something about circulating stuff to the PNC board.
Was that Mr. Cox?
Could you,
Just to the point of reference.
can you
Yes.
repeat that?
That was Graham Cox, 1213 George Street.
Okay. And do we have that point that he was making? I couldn't pick it up.
Shall I repeat it?
Yes, please.
Yes, try again, please.
I have about a dozen comments that I will send in an email to Lisa tomorrow, rather than prolong the meeting tonight.
Thank you. Well,
Okay, so you're going to send an email then with that information, okay.
And Mr. Cox, I will be happy to pass that on to Janet, the recording secretary, and then she can include it in the minutes for the rest of the council, or the commission.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is there anyone else on Zoom to comment on item 4, the element of infrastructure?
no, sir.
None, okay. Then we'll move to the next, which is element 7, governance and implementation. And we'll
All right, great.
turn it back to you for
All
a
right.
recap.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so we're going to move on to the governance and implementation element. This element handles intergovernmental coordination, so partnerships the city has with the county, neighboring jurisdictions, state agencies, so on and so forth, and also addresses the city undertaking capital improvements as well. So as you'll see on the next slide, in the current plan, this was actually 2 separate elements, the intergovernmental coordination element and the capital improvement element. And in collaboration with city staff, it made sense we changed the nomenclature a little bit, but also combine this into one element as we kind of found it logical to do so. There was a lot of crossover in the policy language, and we've seen this approach be successful elsewhere. So again, like I said, we combine those 2 existing elements into this one. One notable thing is each of the existing elements, so future land use, transportation, housing, so on and so forth, the current plan has a number of policies addressing intergovernmental coordination. And so for clarity, we actually stripped all those out and moved them into this element. So anything addressing coordination with another entity is going to be in this element and under an objective that notes as such. And another thing that may be a point of discussion, there is a policy in here that's supportive of the county's efforts in developing interlocal service boundary agreement between the county and the municipalities here in the county. Kind of touched on this previously. Again, this is more so about structurally how we organized this element. And like I mentioned, here's an example, and you would have seen in your packet. So, for example, Objective 713 is intergovernmental coordination related to transportation and mobility. Then another objective as it relates to conservation. So again, just for clarity's sake, we moved all of those coordination policies into this element. Again, in collaboration with the city, we included this draft policy. Again, this one was of note about the city being supportive of. The county has a similar policy in their comprehensive plan about developing an interlocal service boundary agreement. So this is a proposed policy, the city acknowledging that and acting in support of any forthcoming agreement of that nature.
Okay.
And that's generally it on this element. A lot of there's some new policies which I noted there, but again, a lot of was cleaning some things up and reorganizing. So kind of at that pause moment. So ready for discussion on this one.
And if I may add, what's interesting is that, 10 years ago, the Department of Economic Opportunity used to be the DCA, as we all know. So through time and different iterations and different legislations, sometimes they want to include, previously it was like a monitoring element, a separate capital improvements element. They had different elements that they required you to have. Now, they don't mind the streamlining and the combining because they realized it was, well, just kind of a waste of paper to continually repeat and be redundant and not streamline the processes. So when Mike's saying we're combining these things, we're not throwing things out. We're just really trying to make it more streamlined and user-friendly because we don't want this plan to sit on the shelf. We want it to be used. So anyways, that was my edification. Sorry.
Well, I noticed that when I was looking through what was just referenced, the 7-1, all the way through there, it references all the different elements that are controlling. So it's good that, basically it's eliminated all that information from right here, but it's referenced in another area, so it is tight. Mr. Simmons, let's start with you on this end and your comments, questions on.
I'm going to pass right now.
Okay. Mr. Hugen.
Nothing. Thank you.
Mr. Alvarez.
No.
Mr. Carter.
No questions.
Mrs. Contner.
I noticed one thing that I had not noticed before, and it has to do with the funding of, and I noted here, special assessments are to be levied against residents, agencies, or districts that directly benefit from the service or facility. We currently have not done that, to the best of my knowledge. Is this?
I'm sorry, ma'am. Could you point me to the page or the number?
Oh, dear me.
Page 22.
Page 22. Oh, we're in the DIA. I apologize. Okay. Against residents, agencies such as the directly benefit from the service or facility.
Is that the third or fourth point down on the page?
So according to my experts back here, a special assessment would actually be our stormwater fee. That's a special assessment. The recreational impact fee for new developments or new houses, that would be a special assessment. Of course, the county has, and the state has special assessments, and the school has, special assessments. You're a special assessment district for, well, the Sebastian Inlet District is you have a, actually, that's a tax, so sorry.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but right above that, it talks about impact fees, which are not the same. When I read this, I think sidewalks going through your neighborhood, across your property, the
I'm
owner of
hearing
the
you.
property benefits by having the sidewalk. Certainly, the whole community does either. But currently, the whole community pays for a sidewalk wherever it is, even if it's not in your neighborhood. And
Well-
in my viewpoint, a special assessment would be levied against the property that receives the benefit, and that's what it says here. And my question is that new, or is that something we just haven't done?
I'm sure that it's not new, and I'm going to have to get back with you on that, because you're right, I didn't read it correctly, and our CFO, Mr. Kilgore, obviously reviewed all of this and gave me his input, so I have to go back to him and determine what the difference is here in his assessment. This just may be a definition, we may not use it, but it may just be, other revenue sources as defined, but we may not be utilizing that in the city. That's what I'm suspecting now, because in his rendition, you're right, he said that impact fees, the parks and the recreation are impact fees. So you're right on that. I would have to get back with you on that, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. Castino, I'm sorry, was that your
Yeah.
point? Okay,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Castino?
No, I don't have much to add to that. I do agree with Ms. Cottenberg. The sidewalk should be considered a community feature and taxed accordingly. Kind of rubbed me the wrong way to have to pay a special assessment on a walk that the neighborhood drove their bicycles through on a daily basis. That's a benefit to the community. All right, that's it, I'm done. I don't have a page 22 here. So I couldn't even reference what you were talking about.
If I'm right, based on past experience, when there's a new development goes in, shopping center or something to that effect that requires sidewalks, that's included in the developmental cost. But I think you're talking about something totally different than that.
Yeah, okay. What I was referring to is, for instance, and just pluck this from air, there are sidewalks that travel down some residential streets in this city. Most of the residential areas of the city do not have sidewalks, but everyone in the city pays for the sidewalks in the neighborhoods where they do exist. And now that's my point, and that's the way I read the property that benefits from it pays for a special assessment, and perhaps we just simply haven't done it that way, and if we're never going to do it that way, then it shouldn't be here.
Again, I believe that's just a definition of something we could use, and I'm not sure exactly what sidewalks you're referring to, but Mr. Roth is correct. In a new development or an enclosed development, they're going to pay for their own sidewalks, and they're going to pay to maintain those sidewalks. Unless it's a public road, we would not be maintaining those sidewalks. So for instance, Indian River Drive, that sidewalk along Indian River Drive, yes, we pay to maintain that sidewalk, but certainly not in, I don't know, name a private housing. Unless it's on a public road, we're not going to maintain those sidewalks. Does that make sense?
I don't think that's fair.
In some communities, in my experience, that don't have a cohesive plan for sidewalks, They would charge the homeowner upon the issuance of a permit for improvements to the property to add the walk at that time. The issue with that, of course, you can imagine, is the different appearance of the walks from one property to another, and it could be a kind of a hodgepodge. But I understand what you're saying. Some areas of the city don't have them.
The only reason I brought up sidewalks is, and certainly there are other features that really benefit specific properties almost solely, as opposed to in general. And it's kind of like, because this city was laid out by general development so long ago, they left out a lot of really important elements. And one of them is, that, just in my opinion, a sustainable, good, livable city has safe walk areas for every neighborhood, not just some of the neighborhoods. In my neighborhood, for instance, there are no sidewalks, and the streets are very narrow. And people who like to get out and take a walk are not safe, not always. And it's kind of like, but the whole city does not pay for sidewalks in our neighborhood, only in some neighborhoods. So it's not really, and that was my point. But if we're never going to do it, then it doesn't belong in our comp plan.
I think what we need to do at this point is, I think we could hold that in abeyance and get a determination on that prior to actually finalizing the wording on that section. Would that be possible?
Absolutely, but again, we're just looking at the DIA, and the DIA is just saying these are other funding revenue sources. So I'll get clarification on that, but what I want to bring forward, though, is that I believe what you're asking for is something we should add, possibly, for your consideration during the mobility element, when we review that perhaps we should add something such as the city shall pursue a, what would it be called?
A sidewalk master plan or a pedestrian.
Yeah, pedestrian connected pathways or something like that, to see where additional sidewalks could or should be added. Because maybe it's not appropriate on every street. I don't know that. I have no idea. But, you know, a connected network.
I understand. Thank you for that. I picked sidewalks because that was the easiest one for me to explain.
Understood. No, and
but
I
there
love
are
it.
other
I love
issues.
I've got a quick question for Ms. Frazier.
Yes.
Concerning road widths and bicycle lanes in new developments that are being proposed throughout the city, Spirit of Sebastian, anything further. Existing roadways in the city, I've never experienced roads as narrow as ours are. And it's an active community. And bike lanes are currently, I think, allotted 3 feet in width. Are there any plans to widen the roadways to allow for that? Because one of the issues driving through the city is we have a very active landscaper crowd here. And a lot of you have had the experience of trying to get past a landscape truck on what's supposed to be a 2-lane road, which is certainly a 1-lane road once someone puts a truck and a trailer on it. Now, what are we doing to mitigate that?
Okay, so again, I'm going to just try to...
You got a car, bicycle,
Right,
landscape
but you're
truck.
asking, does the city have plans to widen our roadways?
Demand that new roads
New
be
roads are-
wider than existing roads.
Well, new roads, the standard for roadways here in the county is, Dory, help me, is it 22 or 24? 22 for two-way. Just for the pavement. Just for the pavement, and then, of course, you have your shoulder, but I couldn't tell you if there's a standard for the new roads.
Well, we're looking for
But on the old
recreation.
roads, it's just going to be the way it is. I mean,
Well,
I
what
don't-
about the bike lanes? We're looking for livability
In-
factors.
That's true, but in our residential areas, it's not required to have bike lanes in the roadways.
But why not if this is something we're looking forward to doing?
Then we absolutely could be looking at a policy like that if
Then we
you
need to
all.
absolutely look at that, I feel.
Again, it could be under transportation, not governance. And so we'll look at adding something like that. Widening roadways.
With the consideration for
New developments,
bike trail and new
you know,
development.
bike trails, et cetera.
I think it's a very good point. That ties in with a project that we've had kind of on the side of coming up with a walking tour of Sebastian with a signage and, you know, through the, quote, historic area. That's part of it. This is another part of it, I think, the bike mobility part. I'm sorry, Mr. Quizabot.
No comment.
None, okay. Sorry, lost point. I had one that we hadn't covered yet. On page 5, just a point, under 7-1.3.4, the last point you reference automobile, should that be vehicle occupancy rates or just definitely automobile? Were you looking for passengers or commercial?
I'm sorry, Mr.
On
Roth.
page 5. under
5? Page 5.
7-1.3.4.
Got it. Oh, got it. Okay, I'm sorry, sir.
I didn't know if it was too tightly defined by using the word automobile.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, 7-1.3.4?
Yes.
Is that the one related to the airport?
The third item.
Indicators. The city shall use county and state numerical indicators for measuring the achievement of city mobility goals. Numerical indicators shall include for transportation and mobility. Don't you have it?
Yeah, mine are numbered.
Oh. He's
Right.
wondering about the automobile occupancy rates. How do they get those numbers?
No, I'm just, no, the governance not yet.
Yeah, we can look at the nomenclature on that. The intent is likely single occupancy vehicles. So, why is that different on mine?
These are DOT. These are all DOT.
Yeah, those are likely FDOT data sources.
That's in Sarah government.
Okay, I just,
We'll look into that because that's what that likely is looking at, whether if there's data on if there's one person driving versus 3 people riding in a car.
okay. Just a point. I know that on page 7, the policy 7-1.6.2, the city of Sebastian will assign representatives to take part in committees or meetings directed at establishing concurrency between the city, the school, the board, the county, and adjacent governments, meaning Vero Beach, Fellsmere, as established in the interlocal agreement. Has this ever been done?
It's done all the time. We have representatives on the MPO board. We have representatives that always go to Board of County Commission meetings. What else? We have a school board representative that actually sits on this board, has been assigned, and she was given all the information, was sent all the information. She, correct, Dory? I've never met the lady, unfortunately, but you know, she's been provided all this information. So yes, sir, we coordinate quite frequently, or at least
So
we
you're
attempt to.
You're following through on it, then. I just wanted to make sure, because sometimes I question what's happened. it's a lot of work, and it could get bogged down by looking at all of those points under 7-1-.6. It's a lot of work, and I don't want to see us get that old situation of paralysis by analysis, but on the other hand, communication is absolutely critical, and sometimes I think it's missing with or misrepresented by other governments. I also like very much the objective 7-1.8. It's good to have it defined, and I would certainly hope that we can get cooperation. I don't mean from anyone in this room, but, and that concludes my questions or comments. Where's my, okay. Do we have anyone on Zoom to comment on point 7, the governance and implementation element?
No one has raised their hands.
No one? Okay.
No one has raised their hand.
Thank you. Does staff have anything that they wish to add on 8, or 7, I mean?
Anything further on?
No, I'm considering, one of the things that I was insistent that we put in here and make sure is clearly defined, and I just want you all to be aware of it, I'm sure you've read through it, is the Objective 7-1.2, which is the land use intergovernmental coordination. It was in your old document. It's in this one regarding an interlocal service boundary agreement. And, you know, the county and all the municipalities here in Indian River County worked on one many years ago. I think it was like 2009 or 2010, and it never came to fruition. And I wanted to make sure it was still in there, that we could possibly, you know, come up with another one. And what it does is it you know, kind of delineates the future of the county in cooperation with all of the municipalities. And so I just wanted to bring that forward to you and make sure that, I believe that this is a way that all of you want to go with your community. If not, let me know.
No, that's correct. I read that, and I was very pleased to see that that was in there. I thought that's a very good point.
I had proposed that last year, the annexation hearing. I believe the year it began was 2007. Why it didn't continue is beyond me, because the coordinated activities in Sebastian, Fellsmere, Indian River County, Vero Beach, our neighbors, we developed with a master plan in cooperation and coordination with the communities around us. It's the best way to plan growth, to ensure that the schools, city services are adequate for what we're going to afford, instead of operating as 6 different entities. So that is a recommendation that we could forward to council to create. Hopefully it goes somewhere this year. And that's all I've got to say.
Thank you for that addition on that point, yes. Any other questions, comments from the commissioners on 7? If not, we'll move forward then for the presentation discussion on item element 8, which is the public schools element. And some of the points in here, I think Mr. Castino are linking to what you had said about coordinating with other areas and checking out the availability, capacity of schools and so forth. I think this is an excellent roadmap here to coordinate that and know what the data is. So I'm glad you pulled all this together. updated. Thank you. So I'll turn the chair over to you, or the mic over to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so we are going to move on to the public schools element. So this element basically is guides plans for meeting future public school facility needs. Oh, pardon me, hit the wrong way there. And again, reflects the school district's 5-year facilities work plan. This element is almost 99% derived from information provided by the school district. And this element is actually no longer a requirement per state statute, but the city has chosen to move forward and again, in showing that interest in further coordination with the school district. The information in this element, again, has been updated along with the information provided that's bulleted there from the school district. And this information is consistent with the interlocal agreement that was adopted back in 2008 as far as school facilities go. Generally, our work on this element, other than updating the data provided by the school district, was basically cleaning up the language, consolidating some redundant policies, removing some redundant language. Again, just trying to make this element more clear moving forward, but not really any wholesale changes from the previous or the existing version of this element in your current plan.
Just a kind of an aside. I'm looking at all these acronyms here, and I hope we can put in the table of contents a quick rundown of what's SSA, what's TPR, because I read it, and until I was well into each one, I had to refer back to see which one it was. But I'm sorry, it's just a little aside, and I know that you do it for space purposes, and it's a common practice. It's not meant as a detriment, but I think something that we could add somewhere. And Lisa, I saw you shaking your head, so I think we can work on that.
That's a great point, Mr. Chair, and Ms. Frazier and I were speaking about that prior to the meeting. And once we get to close to a final draft, we'll be developing a definitions section that will list acronyms, definitions of common terms that are listed in here. But that's an exercise that we wanted to do once everything was set, so we're not defining terms that ended up not being in there. But that will be part of the process as we get closer to completion. Yes, sir.
Okay, I hope it's only one page. Mr. Simmons, do you have any discussion on?
Well, it appears there
schools?
wasn't a lot of, coordination between the population projection and the number of students. It's my only comment, but guess that's not what we're really here to do, is to look at the budgets and the number of students.
This was the information that's in the back of this section.
I understand it was furnished by Indian River School District, so
yes, and
it doesn't seem to coordinate with section number 4.
Yeah, I'll look here, and as I mentioned, that data did come from the school district. So you feel as if there's a discrepancy in the population projections as it relates to student population projections? Okay. Well, we make a note of that and just make sure there wasn't any discrepancy in maybe what the school district provided, but we'll take a look at that.
That's a good point. If you can verify or check it out, some way to make sure we're on track, because that's a very important part of the mix, and hopefully they're accurate. Their data would be accurate. Mr. Hugan?
Nothing.
Nothing? Mr. Alvarez? Any comments on?
No, everything's fine to me. Looks
Okay,
good.
Mr. Carter?
Good. Really looks good.
Well, good. Mrs. Cottenberry?
I have no comments on this.
Okay. Mr. Christoph?
Christina,
Christino?
it's okay.
I'll get it.
I share Mr. Roth's concerns concerning the numbers. One stands out right in front of me. I had done the study on this last year. And the figure for Treasure Coast Elementary, that $799 includes portable classrooms. It's what they call emergency capacity. The actual capacity of the school is about 70 less than that. So we should just tighten those numbers up. I didn't keep the numbers from last year. I had gotten them from the administration in Indian River County. But let's make sure we got a good handle on what these schools can handle in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Quizabos?
Just for my information, with the new development there, which create a burden to the school system, and how we handle the school's capacity for that. When the new development create a burden to the school system,
Yeah.
and there's a more students available and there's no capacity in the schools, how the school board handle that situation? They be
Is
mitigation
it through the
system, or
SCADL
how
you're
we do
saying?
that?
Go ahead. Dory's going to answer that because she'll be more proficient than I.
And I apologize.
And Dory is our representative from the
You
city.
can use this one though.
Oh, it's in here. So we require when a new subdivision comes in, it's what we call a SCADL. It's a school capacity availability determination letter. And based on, there is a formula that they use for each single-family home that comes in. They project that there may be 0.6 students for elementary, there may be 0.4 of a person for middle school, and there's a figure for high school. They will take those total number of houses that come in, they calculate that on how many students they project are going to come out of that development. Based on the existing capacity, if it's there, and the school district that you're in, you'll get that SCADL letter that we require before we take these projects before you to make sure. If there's not enough capacity, the developer has to pay for it. He will have to reserve capacity, or else, say when he goes over this development, he can reserve capacity if it's there, so that the next development doesn't take that away if they start developing first. But if capacity is not there, it is paid by the developer. They will have to pay on approximately, the school district will figure out if they already have a cost. We have not had any development that has not had capacity yet, but the development pays for it, and the school board has come up with a calculation based on what they're going to need for the middle school, the high school, and the elementary, assuming that a child goes through all those from kindergarten to 12th grade. The developer will pay for that.
What happens when the development is approved, but it's not developed, and developed after 5 years, and the need change, that the more young kids are there, so how that could be handled?
So I know that the school board works with information from Tallahassee based on housing projections, population projections. The MPO has maps based on, they are currently looking at where the new homes, even Sebastian Highlands is divided into almost 20 different TAZ zones, traffic area zones, that they can calculate where the houses and the students are going to be coming from. There's also projections from Tallahassee on population growth, kids, are more families having children, less children. So I know it's a lot of information that they get from Tallahassee, projection and actuarial statistics that they rely on for that.
Okay, thank you.
I guess, Mike, I'm not done with you. 1 second. So we're going to assess a developer. Say we've got, and this is a pretty accurate figure, we've got a capacity in the entire school system in our area for about 1,700 students at this point. So if our development that we're looking at is going to bring in 2,500 students instead of the 1,700, so we're 800 over. And we don't know what the mix is of schools. It'd be one elementary school, one middle school, one high school, or one addition to a high school. How is that assessed upon a developer?
It can be either, I'm not sure if they would have to add capacity to an existing, or they may actually have to require
These buildings are very
Liberty Park,
expensive.
Liberty
so-
Park at the corner of 66 and 510, based on capacity proposed, they built Liberty School. That was part of their school capacity determination. They actually built that school. So they may actually have to, the developer may have to build a whole new.
You're talking about Liberty Magnet, or?
Yeah. Yes, that was built from the Liberty Park was the proposed PUD. Liberty Park, I believe, is still the name that they're using. I was trying to think
Yeah,
if
I
they
think they
changed
hold
it.
about a little over 700 there,
Yeah,
so.
and that project is not totally dead. It's been on the books for a long time, but
10,
it's still in the
15
process
years
of
now,
review.
right.
But that was one of, they came in and based on the amount of people that they were gonna have houses, they built it a whole.
So you're
new
telling me
school.
the developer who never put in a house yet paid the money to have Liberty Magnet School built?
It may, I mean, there may have been some, again, it's worked with the school board. I'm not totally familiar if you don't, because we've not had a development that did not have enough capacity.
I'm just curious as to, because taxpayers usually end up footing the bill for this. So I'd like to know.
We
how
can
we
find
do
out, but I'm
handle
almost
that.
positive that developers are paying for
Right.
whatever they need for those schools.
Okay.
Those schools.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Christino? Mr. Quizabash? None?
None.
I just want a clarification, a question. On page 6, very top of the page, policy 8-1.4.1. Co-location and community focal point. What exactly is meant by that statement? And it appears again as a co-location and agreement. I'm not quite sure I fully understand that.
So so if, in fact, there was a new school to be cited, this is the city showing interest in working with the school district and/or developer in that process to co-locate maybe other community amenities adjacent to or with the school, with the intent of making the school a focal point of the neighborhood. Whereas I know in some communities, school districts will have an agreement with the city to have reciprocal use of recreational facilities, so the middle school might not have a gym, but they can use the cities and vice versa, things like that. So it's generally in the spirit of this, generally speaking, the school being a focal point of the neighborhood, where activities other than daily school activities could take place.
Okay, so then it also ties in with what was referenced elsewhere as far as the design, architectural design of the school to blend with the community and make it look like part of the community.
Right, to the extent feasible that the city would have.
Okay.
And being aware that the school districts do not have to comply with our land development codes.
I understand.
Okay,
yeah.
so
But
I just
that's
wanted to make
part of part of the communication process
Yes.
when this is all started, that hopefully those issues and points can be brought up and discussed with them and come to some type of understanding the development process. Point of clarification on page 10, the second sentence, I'm wondering, it says, charter schools are funded by the state and are monitored by both the school board and state for compliance with charter and student achievement goals. Does the state fund charter schools?
almost positive that they do,
I don't know, page 11.
that a portion of it goes to charter schools, and now the federal government does the same. I'm sorry. Yes, no?
Page 10, I don't have.
Yeah, there's money that's allotted per student by the state and federal government, and charter schools are included in there. Am I correct? You look like you want to say something, Mr. Annan.
Charter schools are creatures of the state. They created it, and they do fund it, though.
But they're not directly funded. They can apply for funds from the state, but they're not funded by the state.
They do fund, states do fund charter schools, to my knowledge, is the question. Whether it's directly funded or indirectly funded, or they have to apply for it, or however they get their money, states do fund charter schools.
Okay, I was just very concerned about that statement because I didn't want it to come across as though we were agreeing with something.
We'll do some research, and I wrote it down, and we'll get back with you on that.
I think they do, you just have to apply for it or something.
Yeah, well, that's the point.
Right.
It doesn't say they apply, it says they're funded by.
Right.
Which, and I know this is just our document, but I know we all want this to be as correct as possible. Any commissioners have any comments on element 8? If not, we'll ask if anyone is on Zoom at this point to make a comment on the public schools element 8.
No one has raised their hand currently.
Okay, thank you. So we've covered them all. We've gone through the
We sure did.
presentation. We've discussed everything, and I think we've had public input. A couple of things that we need to just double check on. Are we, and just a point of clarification, are we finalizing these this evening, or is this then taken and reviewing the points that we've asked going to be reviewed? And
That is correct. So if we all refer back to our calendar, what happens is that we take all your input, and again, I want to encourage the public, if anyone is listening or watching, or even yourselves, again, you're the public too, so if you think of something later on, next week, in a month, or whatever, please feel free to drop us a line, give us a call, we'll incorporate it, and bring it back to you for discussion. We're breaking them up into separate elements just so you're easily digested and really can concentrate on those instead of throwing all 8 at you at once. But all 8 are going to come back to you in the final form in October.
Okay.
So in October, you're going to get the final form. And, you know, if you all want to break it up into 2 meetings, we're going to approve the first 4, and then we'll approve the second 4. That's fine. Approve as in recommend for approval to be sent to the council. That's completely up to you if you'd prefer to do that. Again, our goal was September of this year. We will not be fined. The DEO is allotting another 180 days, so we're absolutely fine with extending it. So in October, you will be seeing the final format. We're going to be taking all of these comments, putting it in there, and then you all will recommend, hopefully approval, hopefully not complete denial. So that's what we're looking for. But tonight, we just are getting your input as part of the public involvement process, and then we'll bring it all back to you again.
I have a recommendation.
I think we can
Oh, I'm
decide
sorry
at
for
a later
interrupting.
point if we want to do all of them in one meeting with public input or not. I see that
That's what I
our
was just
next discussion or review is July 27th on Parks, Recreation, Open Space.
That is actually
That's the Parks one.
part of our process. We're taking, as you know, we took the coastal and conservation element to the Natural Resource Board as another, public involvement portion of this. And so, of course, we feel that it's pertinent and fair to bring the Parks and Rec element to the Parks and Rec Board so that they can bless it and come up with any challenges that they see before we bring it to you all. So we'll be going to them on July 27th, no, June, yeah, July 27th. Yes, sir. And then we'll bring it, whatever recommendations they have will be incorporated and brought to you.
I have a question.
Okay, yes.
Our last meeting, the package you passed out in early March, you said, ignore them because they had been redone and
We've been updating, yes, sir. So it's really, I wouldn't concentrate on the ones that were passed out to you in early March, through this period of quiet. We've made more current updates to those elements. Well, you've looked at the schools. I think the schools was also given to you in March. And now tonight you have a more current
So we'll be getting
update.
those,
I'm sorry, sir?
so we will be receiving those?
Absolutely, sir, and it'll be 2 weeks before the meeting so that you can have time to digest.
Oh, okay. I remember going through it and making some comments, and then I pitched it after last meeting. It's
Oh,
like,
well, I
okay.
mean, you can save your comments. They may still be applicable.
So I just had, I'll save it till then, but I just had some questions as to why the densities in some areas were increased. So we'll get to it.
Okay.
Okay,
Some of the
then
development.
we're on schedule, and I thank you, Ms. Fraser, for getting that letter from the governor who sanctioned our actions, so we're okay. And that's good to know. That concludes the section on new business, which was a review of the comprehensive plan. Next item on the agenda is Commissioners' Matters. Let's start with Mr. Quizabash.
None. No.
None? Mr. Cristino?
I think it would be prudent for us to involve the public in the schools, public schools element, perhaps a workshop before September. Not one specific thing. Have the parents here. We're past the parenting age, so many of us.
Really? Yes.
Yeah,
we are.
I'm done. I took care of that. The other item I noticed on the letter from DEO, and I don't know if it slipped by anyone, but it states that the department reminds the city that all citizens who commented on the amendment, I'm assuming this is the land use amendment from last year, need to be notified of the extension. Is that correct, Lisa?
Yes, sir, and they have been. Thank you.
All right, so we have to track down the citizens who commented last year, or?
No, the ones that sent in letters, and we have all the records of the letters that were sent in, and so we sent them personal notification, and then we also
right, so
posted it on the website.
We're not
So
involving people who stood up and spoke and...
we posted it on the website, and that meets the criteria for public involvement and notification.
Okay, I wasn't sure if they had to be reached out to individually.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Cottenberg?
Thank you. I would just like to compliment the staff. I was involved in the last comp plan, and I think the one before that, although it's a little hazy back then, it's a long time ago. And it is much easier to eat this elephant than the previous ones. Thank you.
Nice job.
Mr. Carter?
Yes, one quick comment, and staff might be able to direct us to the right department. I had a citizen who walks 5 miles every day make a comment to me about Riverside Park, and I think the new bridges that were built there, that the nails or the screws are all popping out, and they're becoming a hazard to walk on.
The bridge from Indian River Drive into the park, is that the bridge you're?
They didn't say specifically which one, but I'm sorry, I know we had some work, or put new ones in, a couple of months back, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they were referring to.
I will bring that to Leisure Services'
Again, they
attention.
didn't tell me which bridge, they just told me the bridge.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's one on each side of the street.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure which side you're referring to.
Mr. Alvarez?
No, other than piggyback on Ms. Cottenberg's comments, yeah, it's a great job what you're doing here, Ms. Fraser. I really appreciate that. Really nice.
Good job.
That's it.
Mr. Hugan?
Nothing.
Mr. Simmons?
I'm finished.
Great. And I want to add my 2 cents on this thing, too. When I looked at this and I realized the detail and organization that went into it, it's easier to understand. So, great job. I was involved in the one earlier and one back in Mishawaka, Indiana, and this is by far the best as far as organization and pulling it all together and simplicity by using the acronyms.
And I want to thank this commission because you are doing the heavy lifting, and tonight's feedback on what the community values are, that's so important for us to be able to put back into these elements. So thank you, appreciate it. Thanks for reading it.
Yes, really. A lot of reading material.
I don't want to miss Mr. Costino's comment about schools, and I don't know if there's any way we can get any further resident parent input on this, if we can discuss it and decide if we want to do something like that, if it would be worthwhile, if we can get people to come out of the woodwork and come to a meeting so they can see that it's their plan.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Roth. Dory is our representative for the school board, and do you want to give input on that, Dory? My understanding is that, this data and many of these agreements and policies really come straight from the school board. They kind of run their own show. We don't have a lot of say into where, what, again, their standards are, or their levels of service, or where they're going to site a new school, or when they're going to build a new school. Am I speaking out of turn here?
No,
so meeting with the parents on the public schools element, I'm just not sure what value they can bring to it. And again, Dory, what do you think? And I'm not saying no, I'm just saying I'm trying to flush it out for you, and it is something we would look at.
Pretty much saying that the school district itself has their meetings with parents for the individual schools. I think our policy is emphasizing our interlocal working with the school board. The meetings that I do go to are usually in beginning of the year, because they put together, they work with us on putting together a plan that they submit to the school board and to the community in June. But every one of those meetings, they've always asked us, what's in the pipeline for you? What kind of subdivisions, applications? So we're constantly giving them information so that they can plan. But a lot of their planning really is from the state, their money that they're getting from the state. With regards to the schools and the parents, I'm not sure what we could put in our comp plan that's going to help the school board with their planning. I think it's just important that we work with them interlocally and just keep our information open to them. That's the best help that we can do for the school board. Yes.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Ms.
That actually makes sense.
Yes.
Well, it does, and I appreciate the answer because it clarified it. At this point, I didn't have any commissioners' matters. I've spoken enough tonight. I understand. I hear you. City attorney's matters, Mr. Attorney Allen. None. Okay. Staff matters.
I have nothing. Neither does the staff.
We said it now.
Mr. Loving? Okay. Well, in that point, I'm going to raise the gavel and say, we're adjourned.
Let me tell you a little secret.